Welcome to UFO Headline News with me, Heidi Hollis. Today is Saturday, November 18th, 2017. You are listening to Inception Radio Network, the voice of the fringe majority. Here is your UFO Headline News coming to us from UFO Stalker. A UFO sighting in Los Angeles, California, November 7th, 2017. The witness states, I parked my car and walked west for a minute towards my house in Echo Park, West Lake, Los Angeles. From our street, there is a clear view of downtown Los Angeles, mostly the northern skyscrapers, including the newly built Wilshire Grand Center. As I approached the gate to my yard, I noticed two glowing red orbs slowly moving southeast towards the skyscrapers. At first, I assumed they were helicopters. However, after a few moments, I saw that there weren't any flashing white lights. I also saw a helicopter in the distance, a little further than the red glowing orbs, giving me a clear comparison between the two objects. I could see the white flashing lights and body and could see the two objects moved in a different manner than the helicopter, more fluidly, although they weren't moving very quickly. I had seen identical red orbs on the 4th of July, and so after determining they weren't helicopters, I stood there for about a minute to watch them. They seemed to be pulsating slightly in brightness. I was frozen, trying to decide whether or not I should run into my house to grab my boyfriend. He has seen similar objects in the sky that he's described as UFOs. Or I should stay and watch, worried they would disappear before I get back inside. Once they moved directly over the buildings in downtown, one seemed to slowly fade in brightness before disappearing. I began to turn to walk into my yard, deciding the second would disappear as well. But as soon as I started opening the gate door, three larger, brighter, I'm assuming, closer, orbs appeared out of nowhere to the north of downtown. I ran into my house to grab my boyfriend, and we both ran up the street to get a better view. We both stood and watched the three orbs slowly move across downtown. Not in a straight line, but moving about fluidly like the first two. We watched for about 5 minutes before all three orbs slowly faded in brightness and seemed to vanish directly over the buildings. They did not disappear by moving further away, being covered by the buildings from our vantage point. They disappeared while in clear sight. There wasn't any cloud cover. We could see the stars out and actually noted how clear it was. A black car that was parked behind us drove off as soon as they disappeared. Not sure if they were watching the event or not, but both walked back into the house. After waiting a moment to see if any more would appear, we could hear a couple helicopters fly in the direction of downtown and continued to after an hour. However, it's common for the downtown LA area, unfortunately, in the excited state I was in. I took a video on Instagram and sent it to my sister, forgetting to save the video and not realizing the video would disappear as soon as she viewed it. She did watch it on while we were standing outside watching the event and agreed it was an incredible thing to see. Next sighting, UFO sighting in Cardiff, Wales on November 5th, 2017. The witness states, I was traveling east on the M4 motorway between Cardiff and Newport in South Wales on Sunday, November 5th. At approximately 4:05 p.m., in the sky to my left was a white object which did not appear to be moving. I took 2 photos on my iPhone 7, but they are not very clear. Once home, I enlarged the images and saw that the object was definitely nothing I recognized, appearing as 4 vertical rectangles side by side. Had I been alone, I would have pulled off the motorway to view the object further, but unfortunately, this wasn't the case. Next sighting, UFO sighting in Phoenix, Arizona, July 16th of 2017. Filming lightning during this first major monsoon storm in Maricopa, Arizona. After viewing videos weeks later, found one video that captured something I did not see with my naked eyes. I was recording any area with potential lightning, so any flash of lights I pointed my camera towards it. But what was viewed in video I did not see at all while I was recording. My phone captured a ball of light appearing, followed by a shadowed craft, a chevron shape, which briefly came to view and then left in a quick flash of light, much like an explosion, which then the ball of light went into a frenzy. This blew my mind when I saw what I accidentally recorded, and you can tell I did not even know what went on or what was happening, as I zoomed in more on the area of flashes of light in hopes of capturing some awesome lightning strikes. Of course, I captured something even more interesting. Wow, cool. Our next sighting, UFO sightings in Sturgeon Bay, Wisconsin, July 15th, 2017. So the first time I saw this plasma orange craft, I was standing on my driveway having a smoke, and it flew very low right over the U.S. Coast Guard station that I live next to, and is a fairly large orb and makes absolutely no sound. The second time was on the 4th of July. It flew in the same area, over my home towards a local beach, down the road in response to fireworks that were being set off. It seems to be able to sense atmospheric activity. I was able to capture it on video, July 4th, and the third sighting on July 15th. The third sighting, I was with 4 friends fishing under a highway bridge just on the outskirts of my hometown when we walked back to our vehicles, and out from under the bridge, I saw it immediately. It is very hard to miss. It was traveling right behind a big storm that just passed over town, which was why we were under the bridge. It was a very beautiful and strange evening. I have quite a bit of footage and photos. I will send as much as I can fit. This craft is not man-made. These orbs have been in Wisconsin skies for a while now. Who knows how long? I'd like to know everybody's thoughts on what they witness here. Next, we have a UFO sighting, a blast from the past. This UFO sighting happened in Stuttgart, Baden-Württemberg on August 1st, 2006. The witness states, "I'm 28 years old now. When I saw that UFO, I was around 16. I was in a garden of a girl with 2 other girls. One of these girls was my best female friend. We had a really tight relation. So when we went to the nearby lake, which was like 500 meters away, we sat on a bank next to the lake. When we went back, she squeezed my hand, saying, 'You also see that thing next to the tree?' It was in contrast to the lake, right in the back of us, which shined in the light of the almost full moon. That thing was like 11 centimeters and had a rectangular head shape. I turned around, squeezed back her hand, and tried to get back to the garden as fast as possible. Like 10 or 20 meters later, she did the same again. Now that was being left for us was an acre to run, full illuminated by the very bright moon. We just tried to get back the way and not watch that horrific view anymore. When back in the garden, we both laid there and saw for sure this disk, 3/4 the size of the moon. Completely perfect surface, no sound, speed accelerating from maybe 100 to 300 kilometers per hour. If that thing was about 6 to 10 meters, that girl who had that sighting with me is now a German policewoman, and I'm a product designer. It really happened, and it really messed with our minds for a very long time. Now on to earthmysterynews.com. UFOs over Oklahoma caught on video with cell phone. 3 videos were submitted with a UFO report submitted to the MUFON, Mutual UFO Network, on November 9th, 2017. The report came from Moore, Oklahoma, and the alleged sighting occurred that same day. The witness claims to have seen the objects at around 5:15 p.m. or so. We came outside and saw two dark objects rising in the air. They were tumbling as they floated up in the air. They kept going up. They looked square and dark. I took some videos with my cell phone. The objects appeared to be silently rising into the air and tumbling as they gain altitude. They do also appear to be square-shaped. Although balloons are typically around and are round, party balloons can come in all shapes and sizes. Could these be balloons that have gotten loose? The vast majority of UFO sightings turn out to be mundane objects, but once in a while there are sightings that are much more difficult to explain. MUFON conducts investigations on sightings submitted to their website, and if they share the conclusions, we will let you all know, they state. Meanwhile, others will likely chime in, and they will keep trying to keep everyone up to date. Our next story from Earth Mystery News is titled, "Something Scorching Hot is Melting Antarctica from Below, and NASA Thinks They Know What It Is." Antarctica is a weird place. Yeah, we know that. Scientists have long studied the behavior of its massive ice sheets and the land underneath them in hopes of understanding the unique geological quirks of the continent, but are frequently puzzled by new discoveries. Now, one of the biggest head scratchers of all might have finally come to play. And it all starts deep under the surface. In an area of West Antarctica called Marie Byrd Land, the ice sheets seem to have a mind of its own, rising and falling by as much as 20 feet over relatively short periods of time. NASA's newest research effort has demonstrated that the reason for this odd behavior is likely to be an incredibly hot mantle plume deep under the surface. A mantle plume, which is an area where geothermal heat generated deep within the planet pushes closest to the surface through cracks and other gaps. It is thought to be responsible for huge subsurface lakes and water flow underneath the ice sheet. Because the geothermal activity isn't constant, the water comes and goes, filling and draining, which in turn affects the height of the ice sheet far above it. NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory were able to crack the mystery by creating a data model of a mantle plume based on observations of the geothermal activity at Yellowstone, which hosts a supervolcano. Using that model, the researchers were able to demonstrate that underground heat sources were likely responsible for the changes in the ice sheet visible on the surface. The research will help inform further study of the area and potentially aid in predictions of future changes in the Antarctic landscape. Scientists regularly study the ice loss of Antarctica as a potential indicator of how global warming is affecting sea levels, both now and into the future. But it seems this particular case, the Earth is playing games with Antarctica all on its own. Go figure, right? Then finally, a look into the paranormal. These stories come to us from ThoughtCo, and this one is entitled The Phantom of the Truck Stop. This is written by Stephen Wagner. The life of a long-haul trucker is a difficult one. Long, tedious hours on the road, away from family for days or even weeks at a time. As Mike L. explains, they also witness many weird and incredible things on their interstate travels. Yet Mike was not prepared for what he experienced one summer night at a tiny truck stop in the middle of nowhere. Hardly the place where one would expect a ghost, if that's what it was. This is Mike's story. He states, I am an over-the-road truck driver. and I drive across all of the lower.
A medium or larger Dunkin' Donuts hot chocolate is now $1.99. Enjoy original, Dunkachino, or the new Almond Joy flavored hot chocolate. Yeah, Almond Joy flavor. And enjoy all that chocolate deliciousness for $1.99. So go ahead, give yourself some hot chocolate happiness for $1.99. It's like a warm and fuzzy chocolatey hug. America runs on Dunkin'. Participation may vary, limited time offer.
48 states. I see some unusual things from time to time, but nothing compares to what I encountered in Palestine, Arkansas in mid-June of 2011. I was on a long haul from Detroit, Michigan to Houston, Texas. This was day 3 of my trip, and I was beginning to run out of driving hours for the day. I noticed a truck stop gas station on the side of I-40. Pulled off and decided to call it a night. I was running ahead of schedule, so I was going to have myself a long 14-hour break instead of the usual 10. The middle of nowhere, off the bat. I didn't like the area, but had no other choice. The bathrooms were unkempt and had enough graffiti on the walls to classify itself as an inner-city truck stop, even though I was practically in the middle of nowhere. It was also a small shop with parking for only a dozen trucks. After washing up, I purchased a new work knife, some hot food, and headed out of my truck. I sat in the captain's chair and listened to the radio while I ate my dinner, with the windows down, letting in the dry wind. The Mississippi River had just begun flooding, but there hadn't been any rain in over a week. The surrounding area was beginning to look like Nevada more than Arkansas. I finished my meal and cleaned up a bit. I slid out of the seat and onto the pavement as a gust of warm wind hit me. I strolled over to the dumpster, tossed my garbage inside, and began slowly walking back to my truck. I fished out a filterless cigarette and leaned against the bug-splattered side of my truck, and lit it with my lighter. I enjoyed the smoke as I watched the sun set below the horizon. A few more trucks had backed into spots. I spotted one guy walking out of the store with a bottle of beer in his hand, looking around nervously as he quickly strode over to his truck. The life of a trucker. Something interesting and very everyday. Risking his job over one lousy beer. I climbed back into the cab of the truck, dropped back into the sleeper berth, changed into a pair of pajamas, and lie down to get some rest. I didn't bother setting an alarm. I felt sleep creep over me and accepted it as I drifted off into dream world. Jolted awake, I woke with the cabin of the truck rocking violently, knocking the bottle of water I had placed on my nightstand over and onto the floor. I sat straight up, fully awake, and pressed the button on the truck's radio alarm. It was shortly after 3 in the morning. I reached down and grabbed the bottle of water that had fallen, twisted the cap off, and took a few deep gulps before wondering what had rocked my truck so violently. Then I remembered the wind. I settled back down, got my heart rate back below 100, and laid my head down on the pillow. The truck rocked again, knocking my ashtray over that I had set on the cup holder and once again tossing my water bottle onto the floor. I flipped on the overhead light, slid on my shoes, and grabbed another cigarette from my pack. I opened the curtains, sat in the captain's chair, and shut off the sleeper light. I opened the door and noticed that it had cooled down considerably. I shut off the truck, pocketed the keys, and climbed down onto the pavement to look around. At this time of night, the truck stop had lights around the gasoline pumps, and their light could not reach the truck parking area. I looked around a moment, lit my cigarette, and then noticed something. The wind had stopped blowing. I wondered what had caused my truck to rock so violently. Earthquake, maybe? I knew that a few had been reported around Memphis, and I was probably close enough to have felt a tremor. But that rocking motion did not feel like an earthquake. It felt like the wind hitting the side of my truck with a strong gust. The apparition. Curiously and cautiously, I walked around the front of my truck to the passenger side and looked down the length of my trailer. I noticed movement. Low to the ground, about 4 feet. Not fast. I used my keys to unlock the passenger side door, jumped up, and grabbed my large flashlight from an overhead storage compartment. I climbed back down and closed the locked door. I clicked on the light and shined it down the side of my trailer. And there was a young girl standing off into the field, about 10 feet behind my truck. But when I looked harder, she wasn't there. Well, like I said earlier, truck drivers see something new every day. This certainly was new. I began to walk toward the rear of my truck, scanning the field with the flashlight for any trace of the girl I had just seen. When I reached the back, there was no trace. It must have been a trick of the eyes. Heck, I haven't even fully awakened yet. I glanced over my shoulder. There were no cars at the pumps, and the clerk definitely hadn't noticed me. I felt the call of the wild coming on, and didn't feel much like walking into the store wearing my pajamas. I was in the middle of nowhere, and no one could see me, so I figured, no harm, no foul. I stood at the rear of the trailer and did my business. Looking around for that girl again, also hoping that she wasn't hiding behind something and watching me do this. I put everything away and walked to the driver's side of the truck toward the cab. I took the last couple of puffs of my cigarette and flung it into the parking lot, used my keys to unlock the truck, and popped the door open. Just as I planted my foot on the fairing, I heard a distinct giggle. A girl's giggle. I stepped back down and shined the flashlight around. Nothing. This is getting kind of creepy, I said out loud. He heard me. A small girl's voice answered back. Okay, I got chills. I jumped backwards away from the truck. The voice had come from inside the cab. Something was wrong. I had the entire truck locked up while I was walking around. There was no way that someone could have gotten in without breaking a window. Steeling myself for what was going to be an uncomfortable encounter at the least, I took a step up on the fairing and leaned my head into the truck. I asked, "Is anyone there?" I asked. I hit the switch to turn on the sleeper berth light. I climbed in. I put a knee on the seat and peered into the sleeper berth. "Good night," a soft voice said, which seemed to emanate from all around me. I flinched as I heard the word and felt a cold chill run through my body. I slid off the seat and stood up in the cab, bumping my temple off the overhead storage bins. I looked around the sleeper. No one was there. I turned around and shuffled into the cab to close the door when I saw the young girl standing outside my truck on the pavement, looking up at me with lifeless eyes. Those eyes, you see, weren't meant for a person. They were designed for a predator. And all of a sudden, I felt like prey. I reached forward and slammed the door, shut and flicked the lock. I quickly decided that I was not staying here for the rest of the night. I turned the key and heard my truck's motor rumble to life, along with the familiar annoying buzzing. That was my air pressure gauge telling me that I didn't have enough air to release the brakes. I took a glance out the window, and there she stood, still as a tree, looking up at me, smiling. I didn't want to get any closer to the window until I was ready to get my truck moving. This was wrong. I didn't want any part of this. This girl was not human. At least, not anymore she wasn't. It was almost as if she was something so inhuman that it would take the form of a human. It's hard for me to explain, and I feel sick just thinking about it. Tell me about it. I heard the siren shut off and hit the valves to supply air to my brake system. As the system began to air up, The siren came on again. Screw this, I told myself. I have enough to get out of here. I disengaged the clutch, ground the truck into gear, and roared out of the parking lot like the devil himself was behind me, which, for all I knew, he was. Ugh! I looked in my side mirror as I was about to start running right and saw the girl washed in the red and amber glow of my running lights. She was smiling at me and waving. I knew, and I flew through my gears as quickly as they would let me as I got back onto the interstate. Ugh! I drove for about 45 minutes, repeatedly hitting the switch to turn on the interior lights to look around the cab and the sleeper before finally spotting a larger truck stop at the next exit. After backing into one of the few remaining spots left, I shut off my lights and turned on the sleeper berth light as I walked into the back. Then I paused. At the store, I had bought a souvenir. Nothing fancy, just a postcard with a picture of Arkansas in it. I had also bought a new knife. I had never even taken the knife out of the box, and remembered putting the postcard into the drawer for safekeeping. The point of the blade had been driven directly into the spot on I-40 where I had originally stopped for the night. The blade had been driven in deep, pegging the postcard to my nightstand. It took me several minutes just to work the knife loose enough to withdraw it from the nightstand. Thankfully, when I turned the postcard over, no message has been left for me. To this day, I do not know what I saw. I hear other truckers talk of strange things that they see on the interstates, U.S. highways, and state routes, but I've never mentioned my experience. I've always felt that just by mentioning her, I'd walk back out to my truck, and there she would be, sitting on my bunk and waiting for me. I threw that postcard away and tossed the knife into the dumpster. I got another postcard from Arkansas, just to keep the collection going. I've got 36 so far. Whew! That was a highly disturbing story. My goodness, absolute chills. Well, I want to thank you for joining me, Heidi Hollis, here on UFO Headline News. And remember to go to InceptionRadioNetwork.com to read and see all of the links to the news stories shared here today. Also, feel free to visit my personal website at HeidiHollis.com. And also read my paranormal comic strip, TheOutlandersComic.com, or on Inception Radio Network's main page. Always be powerful by staying informed, and have a wonderful rest of your day.
A medium or larger Dunkin' Donuts hot chocolate is now $1.99. Enjoy original, Dunkachino, or the new Almond Joy flavored hot chocolate. Yeah, Almond Joy flavor. And enjoy all that chocolate deliciousness for $1.99. So go ahead, give yourself some hot chocolate happiness for $1.99. It's like a warm and fuzzy chocolatey hug. America runs on Dunkin'. Participation may vary, limited time offer.